Well, everybody, I've got 6 o'clock, and I had my phone blowing up at me, so nope, nothing important. Can't wait till later. Announcements-wise, we'll go ahead and get started. Announcements-wise, you've probably seen a lot of them in the bulletin, but there's the part-time custodian that they're looking for here at church. Again, talk to the office about that. The missions emphasis, there's still time to give an offering to our mission projects. Money, obviously, there's a list of all the stuff that everything goes to that they're all going to split up. You can see it covers local, international, statewide stuff. So, I mean, it covers pretty much everything. The boys fishing day, again, that sign-up's out there on the hub, on the sign-up sheet. That's on the 11th. Again, details, meet at the church at 11, or excuse me, church at 1. And they'll return to the church for a barbecue. I was assuming that you all would have the fish that you caught, but maybe are covering their bases in case the fish don't bite. Easter egg the Easter egg hunt is April 4th. Again, they're looking for the candy to fill the eggs. It's all in bold. We need candy donations ASAP, so we have time to fill the eggs before the hunt. So that's all in bold. So, crack the whip. I'll tell Paula that I cracked the whip on you guys. Business meeting is Sunday. If you haven't seen it, they've got out on the hub thing, they've got the meetings from the minutes from the last time to take a look at. The child protection training has been postponed. It was set for this coming Sunday, but they've postponed it to April 19th. This is the same day as the Camp Joy meeting. So it'd be all held all at the same time. Now, again, that's a requirement if anybody wants to work with the children or youth, or planning on going on any mission trips. So if you're planning on doing that kind of stuff, make sure you're going to join us for that. In a couple weeks, the widower banquet is right after morning service. Again, there's a sign-up sheet out there at the hub. And then there's a couple other things. The Operation Christmas Child Craft Night, that's March 19th. For those that are interested in the international missions, there's the missions meeting in that 19th. So the 19th is a busy night. And I've got a note in here that says Lifeline screening, March 24th at FBC. Does anybody know what that is? I guess. Okay, so if you're looking at, so basically for those that online or didn't hear, basically that is Farm Bureau, basically an insurance company's coming in. An insurance company is going to come in and maybe do some health screening, and that's on March 24th. So again, there's probably a sign-up sheet someplace, but that is all the announcements I have. Prayer request, let's see, what do I have here? The Richard Labrash family services is March 26th. So again, be praying for that family, for the loss. Susie Mackey had knee surgery today. Does anybody know how is she come out of everything all fine? Does anybody know? She's home. So she's at home, and to be determined on how effective the knee surgery was. But the doctors can do some pretty amazing things today. So she'll probably be up and going here pretty soon. Joe Michelle, shoulder surgery. He's at home doing well. Again, so be praying for him. Bill Kuntz, it says cancer. I don't know. That's what the announcement says. Bill Kuntz has cancer. So again, be praying for him. I'm sure I'm not privy to what's going on there, but doctors, any sort of goings on with that. Grace Dillon is having heart problems, and that's their grandson, right? Granddaughter, sorry, Grace. Is again having heart problems, surgery is a possibility. Tim Hines had some surgery. He's home recovering, so again, be praying for him. Other than that, any other prayer requests or praises? I do see Mike Woods here, so that's a big praise. Any others?
Yeah, pray for the search committee, as I mentioned the last couple of weeks, we're kind of at a pivotal point.
Okay, so, all right, we pray for the search committee. They're, as Doug said, at a pivotal point. So again, be praying for them, for discernment, for all the good stuff. And hopefully maybe that's a good sign. Yeah, we've been here before. We'll see how it all rolls out. God's timing, right? Jim.
Grant has an unspoken request, just like keeping in your prayers, discernment, wisdom.
Okay, so Grant Deshawn has an unspoken, just be in prayer for him, for some discernment, some decisions, and what to do. It's just hard times sometimes to think through what's going on. Anybody else? I know, Pete, you had one.
Jim Kennedy went to the hospital earlier this morning. They really don't know what's the matter with him. He's just falling all over himself, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So Jim Kennedy's in the hospital. They're trying to figure out what's going on. So we really don't know what's much going on with him. And hopefully they will find those tests to isolate things. Yes? Dean Aging. Okay, so Dean Aging has cancer, and the prognosis is not looking good. Okay, so yeah, it's tough times maybe for that family. Needs probably a lot of comfort, prayer for comfort. Anybody else? All right, well, I will give us a moment to pray in silence, and then I'll close us. So let's go ahead and go pray a little bit. Dear Lord, again, I just want to thank you for being here today, to gather together, Lord. And again, we thank you for the opportunity to learn of your word, Lord, and just thank you for your praises, even the blessings, Lord, that remain unspoken. We know that that they always come. We know that they're there, Lord. We just even when we don't see them, we know that you're blessing us, and Lord, and you're directing us, Lord. Again, we just want to lift up the health needs, Lord, with Dean and Jim Kennedy and Bill Coons and Grace Dillon, Lord. We know that there's needs, there's physical needs, Lord, and we just want to lift up the doctors to you, Lord, that they have the guidance from you on treatments, Lord, on their hands as if surgery is needed, Lord, on the nurses that can have that care, Lord. Again, and then at the same time, Lord, we just lift those that are going through this, Lord, that they see you, and that even in spite of the issues that they're going through, that they can still show your love, Lord, to the doctors, to the nurses, Lord, wherever they go, Lord, again, because that's just what we do as Christians. During the hard times and during the good times, we bless you, we thank you, we give everything to you, Lord. And again, we just thank you. Again, we praise you for the surgeries that have gone well with Tim and Joe and Susie, Lord, that, again, we just continue, let there not be any complications in healing, Lord, and that therapy goes well, Lord. Again, we just, that you're still guiding and directing us through even those. Again, Lord, we just want to lift up the word tonight to you. In your name I pray. Amen. All right. So we are week 2 of Alistair Begg's study. Grace and Favor is what it was titled. Just real quick, remember where we're at. We kind of ended last week with them traveling back from Moab. Remember, Naomi and Elimelech went to Moab because, well, famine, and was looking for some place to go that they could live and survive. Their 2 sons married Moabite wives, Moabites, and they died, they died as well. So we have Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. Is that right? Orpah. Basically trying to go back to, basically have decided that, okay, this isn't working here, we're going back home. Or no, to Naomi's, we're going back home. Basically, she said, basically in the end of it, they argued. I don't want to say really argue, but Naomi tried to keep Ruth and Orpah back in Moab, and Ruth basically said, no, I'm going with you. And so here we are in or around Bethlehem, Naomi and Ruth. Again, this is around the barley harvest. This is also around the time of Judges. So again, remember what was going on with Judges. The Israelites were pretty much, for lack of better terms, a hot mess, much like the world is today. They're just a hot mess. I think, what was it, how is it said in the Bible that they could do whatever they wanted to do in their eyes instead of the Lord's eyes. Again, Naomi is pretty bitter. She called herself Mara when she arrived. Is that right? Anyway, just so they're kind of, and also at the same time, Ruth turned away from her Moabite lifestyle. If you remember what Moabites were all about, what Stephen had mentioned last time, they're pretty much, as I think I was doing, Gentiles, but they also didn't follow the Lord. They've had their own gods with little g with an S. And so they were doing their own things. But, what we talked about last week, Ruth had mentioned your people, let's see, where is it? 16. Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you will go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. So Ruth has turned away from her Moabite lifestyle, but she's still a Moabite, according to the Israelites. So there's a whole lot of issues going on there that she has to deal with now that she's back in Judah. And of course, Naomi has to, basically she's home, right? She has to confront her grief, and the fact that she's returned. So who knows, we kind of have the same situations, right? People go away and come back, and we always kind of like, what's going on? We always question those folks, right? Sometimes. So again, Ruth, she's a Moabite, no prospects of a job, no prospects of a husband, no prospects of really friends. But either way, kind of like what Stephen had mentioned last time, they have a past, we have a past, good or bad, But Alistair's study is talking about, and especially going into this one, is God still directs our lives in the most simplest ways that we really half the time don't even know until much, much later. I think the story, the Ruth in general, is kind of a big example of that. Kind of spoiler alert. Ruth marries Boaz, but Ruth just happens to land in Boaz's field, and Boaz just happens to be a member of the Elimelech clan, but things just happen, right? But not God. Anyway, so let's go ahead and watch the video, and we'll go from there.
Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. And he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers." So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now, listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." Every so often I have the opportunity to speak at high school graduations and try to resist the temptation to tell lies to all the students. Lies like this: no one is brighter than you, no one is faster than you, no one is greater than you. You are the students of tomorrow. You are the very best. Now, why would I not say that? Well, because it isn't true. The vast majority of them and of us are just very ordinary individuals. Of course, there are folks who go for gold. There are people who can shoot under par consistently. But by and large, our lives are marked by simple events and a steady consistency. I think, if I may speak personally, my roots in Scotland are a help to me in this regard. We lived adjacent to a school when I was a boy under the age of 12. And the construction that took place on the school allowed me, at the end of the day, when all the workers had gone, to go around the building site and pick up old soda bottles. I gathered them all up so that I could take them and get money back for them. And if I had enough of them, then that would be enough for me, perhaps, to go and play golf. It's a habit that has really died hard with me, and it's an embarrassment to my wife and my children, I think, when in going through, for example, a McDonald's drive-through, and I look out of the car window and I see that there are coins lying on the ground. And so I pull forward without any shame, and I walk back and I pick them all up and I put them in my pocket. And they say, well, why do you do that? Do you need that? I said, no, I don't need it, but I don't understand why you would leave stuff lying on the ground. Now, I begin in this way because I think that Ruth would agree. Ruth, of course, has come from a different place. She's now in the company of her mother-in-law. She's left her sister-in-law behind. And she wakes up in the morning, I imagine, in that period of time between sleep and being alert. Or maybe the 3 o'clock in the morning as perhaps you wake up, as I often do. And you lie there and you think about things. And she lies and thinks, I wonder how Orpah is doing. I wonder where she is. Perhaps she says to herself, I wonder what my life will be. I'm a widow. I'm now living with my mother-in-law. It doesn't look like there is much in the offing for me that certainly would be in the realm of the spectacular. But then eventually it's time to get up, and the sights and sounds of the day stir her to action, just in the same way as wherever we live, we hear those sounds. They mark the beginning of a new day, whether it is a school day or a work day or a rest day, whatever it might be. And she then is the one who asks a question. She says, where can I find favor? Where can I find favor? And she takes the initiative in answering her own question. She's a remarkable young woman, isn't she? Because we might expect her to have said, what am I supposed to do now? I mean, I know I said I wanted to come with you, but what do you want me to do? But she's not doing that. No. She decides that she's going to take up the opportunity that has been provided for her by the law of God to be able to go into the fields of the harvesters and gather up the bits and pieces that are left by them. That is going to be an exciting journey. But before that all happens, we're introduced to another character. A mysterious character initially, a strange name, Boaz. I don't know if you've ever called one of your children Boaz, but it's not a bad name. But he is a man of financial means, and he's also a man of moral integrity. And he's introduced to the storyline without us really knowing exactly what it's going to look like or what it's going to mean. And so it is, Ruth sets out into the day. The disparate elements of life are represented in the fact that she says to Naomi, I think I'd like to go and do this. Naomi encourages her to do that. She then, we're told, just happens to find herself in the corners of a field owned by a man called Boaz. Now, if you think about your life, most of the circumstances of our lives, the providences of God, the wheres, the whens, the ups and downs, and so on, they're seldom self-interpreting for us. If we were to try and explain why we are where we are, we can say, well, I made a decision about this or a decision about that. Yeah, but how did you end up in this particular place? And often I think we're tempted to imagine that somehow or another there is an ideal place. If only we could be in that place with that person engaged in that activity. But in actual fact, there is no ideal place to serve God except the place he sets you down. And although the initiative was entirely hers, and although the decision was entirely hers, God was overruling her natural, willful decisions to put her in the place where she was going to get an answer to her own question. Where can I find grace and favor? And it is in this character. Actually, when you think about the story, And you think about Ruth and the humility of Ruth and the thankfulness of her heart. It's a wonderful picture of what it is to be included in Jesus and part of his family. Humility, thankfulness. When you think about this character, Boaz, in terms of generosity, cheerfulness, the way he greets his workers, the way he includes Ruth, you have a sense that if you squeeze your eyes together, you say, you know, this is making me think of somebody else. And of course, as the story unfolds, we're going to find that it is ultimately pointing forward, as the whole Bible does, to the Lord Jesus. It's perhaps a good time for us to remember something that perhaps you learned at Sunday school as I did, that the Bible is a book about Jesus. In the Old Testament, he is predicted. In the Gospels, he's revealed. In the Acts, he's preached. In the epistles, he's explained. And in the book of Revelation, he is expected. And so as you work your way through this study, keep that in mind, that we lose our way around the Bible when we take our eyes away from Jesus, so that these characters in this story are either by way of shadow or by change or by development, pointing us forward to the only one in whom any one of us are able to find grace and favor. Whenever I think about the faithfulness and consistency that is displayed in Ruth's life, I think of a lady that I met along the journey of my own life. She was a medical doctor. Her name was Helen Rosevear. She was part of the medical team that in the 60s suffered under the guerrilla attacks in what was then the Belgian Congo. When she came to the end of her life, and she ended her life living in the north of Ireland, I had the privilege of going to see her. And when I went to visit her, she was in bed. She was not really communicative at all. She had a companion in the room, and it ended up that I had to pretty well do all the conversation. Not only the questions, but I also had to do the answers. And it went on like that for a while, and then eventually I said, you know, I need to go, Helen. And I said, I want to read the Bible and pray with you. And that was it. And then her friend said to her, do you not have a blessing for Alistair before he leaves you? Realizing that we would never see one another again this side of eternity. And she pulled me closer to her, and she simply said, keep on keeping on. And that message, exemplified, I think, in many ways in the characters in this story, is a message that isn't a daunting message. It just means put your next foot forward, do the next thing, do what you're able to do, and be faithful in doing it. Don't search for the spectacular. Embrace the wonder of the ordinary and the fact that God chooses to use the likes of us, that he puts his treasure in old clay pots so that the transcendent power would seem to belong to God and not to us. That's why the hero of our story is not Ruth or Naomi or Boaz, but ultimately the one to whom we're pointed, namely Jesus.
All right. So a couple things before we get into a little deeper discussion here. I think, the video highlights our lives, as he said, are marked by simple events and a steady consistency. I don't think there's probably no better way to put it, right? I mean, there at the very end, he's like, one step forward, just keep going. And God's there in every step we take. And whether we realize it or not, he directs our lives, directs where we need to go, and we say it's free will or whatever. I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole, but God moves us around where he needs us, and wherever he needs us is where we need to serve. That's basically the end of this, right? I mean, if you look at it from Ruth's perspective, It definitely didn't look extraordinary. I mean, we know the rest of the story, right? I mean, Ruth is in the lineage of Jesus. I mean, what more spectacular, effect is there? But at this point in time, she didn't know. She's just got moved in a new place, doesn't know anybody, doesn't have any prospects of anything, right? She's a widow, But as you said, God intervenes right there at her house. Like I said earlier, as we kind of go through the story, she happens to eventually land in Boaz's field. Happens to be a relative of Elimelech, and again that kind of works into later on in the story. Boaz happens to be a worthy man according to God. I don't know. Again, we're looking at it all in hindsight, right? Think about you guys, we all think back to your lives. How often have we now looked back and, like Rick was talking, in the sermon Sunday. He's like, all these people had an influence on him 20, 30, 40 years ago, and now look at him today. Again, we don't know what kind of influence we're having on each other right now. I mean, this is an ordinary Wednesday night for us. What can God is going to do in our lives because of tonight? I don't know. We won't know. We may never know. But anyway. But again, as he mentioned, Ruth and Boaz, the Ruth story obviously ultimately points us to Jesus, the Redeemer, the kinsman redeemer, the whole spiel that we'll be talking about, the other folks will be talking about later as you go on to chapter 3, 4, and 5. But we'll just jump into a little bit better, a little more detail about these verses, these 13 verses. Again, we had talked about, mentioned last week, Ruth wanted to support Naomi. Again, we mentioned it from verse 16 and 17. If you think about it, Ruth kind of upended the traditional role of provider for the widows at this point in time when she said, I think it said verse 2. Let me get to it. When she said, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes so I can find favor. That wasn't necessarily what widows were supposed to do in the, they weren't supposed to, Ruth wasn't necessarily supposed to support Naomi. That was for the rest of the clan, Elimelech's clan, right? And again, I got a verse 5 here. Let me go find Deuteronomy 25. I marked it here so I can find it quickly back. 25, 5 through 10. It says, if brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders at the town gate and say, my husband, brothers, refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. And again, later on in the Ruth, we'll be talking about this a little bit more too. So if we move on, it says, then the elders of his town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up my brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled. But anyway, it goes on to basically says that the men of the family, relatives are supposed to take care of Naomi. But she decides to do this on her own, whether that was youth, whether that was God directed, I don't know. It works out, right? But she wants to find somebody She wants to figure out somehow to help the two widows, support them. And again, then she goes off to gather barley lawfully as a foreigner in the land. And if you want to, you can go look up Leviticus 23, and it talks about it. But again, whether her decision was God directed or kind of her own, put a line in the sand and I'm going to do this, God basically, again, directed her to Boaz's field. And again, how many times have we recognized that our path intertwined with other people for a reason? Obviously, it's, as Alistair said, we never really know in the moment. It's always much, much later. All right. So we talked a little about Ruth, but now we also need to kind of talk about Boaz, right? Verse 1, he talks about he's a worthy man. And again, the verses 4 through 10, he kind of gets a little more fleshed out. Let's see. You can kind of see, the way he greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you, and the Lord bless you. They called back. And as you read through the rest of the Ruth, you can obviously see what his character is. It's obviously very God-driven. He is not afraid to share his faith. I mean, obviously he's out there in the fields, basically saying, "Hey, the Lord be with you," and the Lord, and he's talking to the reapers. Again, this all kind of implies his faith is out in the open. Again, he's not just doing it on the Sabbath in the tabernacle. He is out there showing it to the world. For us today, it's not, our faith is just not Sunday church or Wednesday church, right? And again, the idea that he asked about Ruth, he notices Ruth, because I can only imagine, gathering wheat and gathering barley is not an easy job. So there's probably a lot of people in the field, and there's probably lots of things going, other people in the field gathering behind the reapers to gather up the little, because obviously there's probably poor there, and they were probably gathering up the leftover grain too. But he notices Ruth out of all this. So he's probably a very caring person too about all the people that are in his fields. But he asks and he finds out who Ruth is. But again, he could have just let this foreigner, this sojourner, just kind of do her thing out in the field. But again, he chose not to. Or did God guide him? That's all the fun stuff, right? And also, again, this is there's the other aspect of this. This is kind of a love story too. Is there a budding romance here? What was it? Let's see, where is it? When he asked about Ruth, there in verse 6, the foreman replied, "She is the Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi." And they had said she had asked to glean. And then he goes on, verses 8, 9, 10. He talks to her. "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here." He wants to take care of her. "Stay here with my service girls. I've told the men not to touch you." So he's trying to protect her. Again, again, this is just me thinking. Is that the budding romance, or is that because how much he cares for his people? Either way, it still shows his faith, right? It still shows that he cares. He still has a heart for people. Again, so if Boaz is constantly kind of thinking, what does God do, for him? Does he keep, he keeps God in the forefront of everything he does. What about us? Do we, how often do we fail at that? I mean, I do that all the time. I mean, going to Walmart or the workday, sometimes it's hard to forget that we're supposed to show God, right? Show God's love. One of the comments in the book was, "We will never bring others to God if we do not show him in our everyday situations." I mean, I think that's pretty cut and dry, right? I mean, we can tell people about Jesus, but if they see us running around like cuckoo heads, what's that really going to imply about God, right? If we have that genuine fear of the good fear, not the real fear, love of God in our heart, that his presence, his blessings in our everyday life become that a privilege to show. I mean, think about it. We have a privilege. We get the privilege because we know Jesus and what he has done for us. We get the privilege to show God's love. Not everybody gets that opportunity. Think about it from that standpoint. How much more awesome does that insinuate things? It's like if we can think about it from, hey, you know what? I get to show God's love. And again, the final point for this section from 4 to 10, again, the humility that Ruth has. Again, we'll start to see that show greater throughout the rest of the story. She's a foreigner. Her past precedes her. The Moabites are not looked upon very well in the Israelite world, according to the law. If we read, Judges, let's work our way backwards. Judges 10:6. This is, again, remember, this is the time of Judges, so let's see, 10:6. 10:6. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals and the Ashtaroths and the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, and the gods of Moab, the gods of Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. And because the Israelites forsook the Lord and no longer served him, he became angry with them, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and Ammonites. So God basically punished them for dealing with the gods of Moab. And if we go even farther back to Deuteronomy, (23) 3 and 4. No Ammonite or Moabite or any of his descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, even down to the 10th generation. For they did not come to meet you with bread and water on your way when you came out of Egypt, and they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor and Aram and Naharaim to pronounce a curse on you. So, if you're from Moab, it's kind of like going into some of the worst. You don't necessarily want to go there back to Israel if you're from Moab. So, but she's there, and here's Boaz. That basically says, you know what? Your past doesn't matter. I want to understand. I want to care for you, protect you. Because you're with Naomi, because I have heard about what you have done with Naomi, and how you've want to protect her and care for her. Just because you're from Moab doesn't necessarily mean that you're the evil one and you need to be smote or smited. I don't know, whatever that word is. So again, the idea now, again, there's some of that application is just because we have going forward, we can't change our lives if we have God in our hearts. All right, the last few verses, 11 through 13. I'll read these few verses. This is Boaz. Okay, so this is at this point in time. I'll read verse 10 here. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She exclaimed, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And then she replied, "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. You have given me comfort and have spoken kindly to your servant, though I do not have standing of one of your servant girls. So in the end, Ruth, obviously, humble, grateful for the care, the love, the kindness that Boaz showed. And obviously from those first verses, the gratitude's evident, right? Again, the comment is Ruth has no standing in Israel. Why would she do that? Why would somebody do that? Boaz had heard about Ruth and Naomi's story, but Ruth's character also shows. From that love story angle, is character a key attribute to a solid marriage? I don't know. If you have a character that can withstand hard times, rough times, life changes, Ruth has kind of been through it all. Grief, getting moved, don't know anybody, but she basically decides after coming to Bethlehem, saying, all right, I'm going to pick up, pull up my britches and start going. And we'll figure something out. Right? And again, that's from the love story angle. Isn't that a great marriage to have if both the spouses are like that, where the character is, you know what? We're going to figure this out. Whether we're going through the good, the bad, the ugly, we're going to get this. We know we're going to get through this. And again, I keep reiterating this. This is the time of the judges. Again, what does that do to thinking about Boaz's character and Ruth's character? This is when the Israelites are going crazy. I think it's, the last few verses? The very last verse in Judges. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit. And there was a lot of ideas, much like today. But Boaz chose to follow, because he's noted as a worthy man, he chose to follow God. Much like today, right? We have a lot of different avenues to take in our lives. The world is pretty enticing, but following God is so much better. And kind of looking at this, what does that kind of imply about their character? And again, by the same token as Ruth, we don't have any standing before God either. We, as in Alistair said, we need Jesus to stand in for us, and the whole idea that this is an allegory to the Ruth is an allegory to Jesus. As we get through it, how should we act toward our Redeemer? Boaz turns out to be the Redeemer for Ruth. By the same token, Christ is our Redeemer. If Ruth was so grateful and so thankful for what Boaz has done in her life, at least in chapter 2, and she doesn't know yet what's going to happen later on in her life. We know what Jesus did for our lives. How should we act toward our Redeemer? Just thankful. So in the end, so I think I got a couple different things here. Ruth's perspective, our past, our current decision, our past and our current decisions all progressive forward. Again, this is the idea that Alistair said. Every step, take a step every day. God's going to use those circumstances. He's going to put people are going to go in and out of our lives to direct us. God's going to direct us. Our faith, if shown, is seen. And that impact can be far-reaching. Again, I think Rick mentioned, mentioned that Sunday. That impact can be really far-reaching. Whatever God gives us should be met with gratitude and thankfulness. And again, Ruth basically made her life wherever she was at. Moab, Bethlehem, right? Your location is good as any. to start showing your faith. You're not necessarily the green, we always think the grass is greener on the other side, right? Well, it's not. There's nothing better than right here where you're at. Start now. Boaz's, show our faith wherever you go. It's going to bring others along. He had all those reapers that were pretty excited about what he's done and what he's doing in their lives. Ruth obviously saw something, and his faith led him to always be on the lookout for caring, right? Because obviously he saw Ruth, and he met others on their level. He went to Ruth and started asking questions. He heard about Ruth, and he basically said, okay, I'm going to help you where you're at. It wasn't, hey, you need to come to my level first and then we'll talk. He went down to basically her level and said, all right, let's start here. I don't think there's nothing better than that. All right, well, that is all I have. We'll pray and then we'll be done. Dear Lord, just again, we thank you for your time, Lord, and we just thank you for the fellowship that we've had here for the few moments. Again, we're so glad for technology, Lord, that we can have folks from all over the world, from all over the churches in the U.S. to be able to study your word. And again, we want to thank you for what you're going to be doing in our lives, how the people that are going to be interact with us love with each other with love, Lord. And we please bring us back safe next Sunday. In your name I pray. Amen.